What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, managing editor at Fightful.com, FightfulWrestling.com. Here with Jimmy Jacobs. You'll be able to see him on January 4th for Zelo Pro at Milwaukee Meltdown. It's at the Pabst Theater. And I assume, Jimmy, you will also be scooting over to Nashville 2 days later for Impact Wrestling Homecoming?
Absolutely. That's what I do nowadays, man. I'm writing and producing for Impact Wrestling. I've been doing that for the past year, and I got to say, man, it's a blast.
Well, I as we film this, it's December 21st. Last night, you had a really awesome live stream where you answered a ton of questions about creative writing. What motivated you to do that, to kind of open yourself up to everyone and say, yeah, bring it on. I'll answer whatever you got.
Well, it started from a conversation the week prior, based off something Brian Alvarez had tweeted. Raw had its lowest rating of all time, and Brian Alvarez tweeted, like, what an embarrassment. And I read that tweet after I had, we were the first day of an Impact creative meeting. Started maybe like 2 p.m., got done around 2 a.m., and we started with a blank whiteboard, and we ended the day with a blank whiteboard. So a day of like, man, we've been working all day and nothing's gotten done. And I read that and I'm like, man, like, I don't think people know. Like, I don't think they get or appreciate like how difficult it is. And we do a 2-hour show in Impact, and an hour extra, for Raw. That extra hour is so, it makes it so difficult. Yeah, even if you take out the Vince McMahon factor of it, which that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Just writing a 3-hour show every single week with a limited roster, and in a time and place where everything's been done, every match has been had, every angle's been run, and trying to come up with new, fresh stuff, it's just hard. So I just wanted to start a conversation that's above like, oh, this sucks. That was, yeah, it probably did suck, man. But maybe let's have a conversation of why it sucks, or have an understanding of why it sucks, and start to talk about, what wouldn't suck. Because these sort of ideas can come from anywhere. I'm a big proponent that you don't need to have ever taken a bump or trained a day in wrestling school to have a good idea.
Yeah, one of my things personally, if it makes sense, but it's not the greatest thing in the world, I'm okay with not having a checkmate, as long as some of the chess pieces are moved around and I see that there's some progress. You have been on both sides of things, Impact Wrestling and WWE, and you mentioned the 12-hour creative meeting. I'm sure, like, I know they both have challenges because of Impact's taping schedule. What are some of the major differences that you face there? I know that on WWE, you've got a roster full of contracted talent. In Impact, some of them are on contract, some of them are on agreements. What other types of similarities and differences do you face that maybe people don't consider when they make statements?
They're similar in that you have a finite roster and a finite number of stars and people that, I don't want to say this disparagingly, but people that matter on that roster, as far as like, big stars. You go, in your sort of, in the order of, your number one heel, number one babyface all the way down, you start to get to the bottom of that. And it's hard to have a match between a couple guys that aren't as established and don't have that TV time or don't have that star power. So in that way, it's similar. It's different in Impact. I don't have to answer to the likes of Vince McMahon or somebody with that same sort of personality type. So that has its benefits. One of the other good things about Impact too is the rules are what we make them. So if I come up with an idea and say, hey, what if instead of Sue Young and Allie having a match at Bound for Glory, how about, like, for some reason Allie has to, like, go into the underworld and fight Sue Young there? And what if Sue actually kidnaps Allie's friend and Allie has to go rescue her, and I come up with this whole story and we shoot something kind of in an alternate dimension? Like, I get to do that. So that's nice. And one thing that is kind of cool that I didn't maybe appreciate coming into Impact is that because, like, so we just, over the past 2 weeks, wrote the next 6 weeks of TV. It's kind of nice that no matter what happens, like, these are the 6 weeks of TV. After we do day one, we're not going to drastically change day two. In WWE, it's I was very surprised by how week by week it was, how you could try to do something and have a long-term plan, but generally that would get derailed like quite quickly.
How close to showtime would things like that change? I mean, I had access to a lot of WWE's run sheets throughout this summer, and there were a couple times when they didn't get completed and distributed to whether it be production employees or television distributors until maybe a couple minutes before the show aired. Was that a regular thing in WWE?
So the day of changes to the show, of course, happened every week, because and Vince believes this, and I do too. It's something I agree with Vince on. Like, the best idea wins. So even if it's at the 11th hour, if there's something better, like let's do that better thing. Let's not be like, well, we already have this written on paper, so we're going to go to this. No, if something better comes along, like, let's do it. But it would vary, man. It would vary. Sometimes the changes would be minimal. There are other times you get there the day of the show, and man, I remember one time we were in Texas, and Vince likes to visit his mom in Texas. So he showed up late to the show, and so he showed up late, and then changed a significant portion of the show, and so we were scrambling and doing rewrites. I mean, right up into showtime. I remember, I think the show started with like Roman Reigns, and Roman Reigns used to come from the concourse, like from the Shield used to do, and a writer having to run up to the concourse to give Roman Reigns the script for what was going to happen. I mean, he had an idea what was going to happen in segment one, but like, hey, here are the words, man. And you're 10 minutes before you're supposed to go out there or whatever, and that's crazy. And in moments like that, I had a true appreciation for, I'll say, how well the place runs. But Seth Rollins tweeted something last week about how it's a modern miracle that the shows go off as well as they do. And in that sense, it is, in the sense that, like, hey, it's never happened where somebody's in the middle of the ring. It's like, damn, what's happened? I don't even know what's happened. Like it's never gone so far off the rails, like where it's like, oh my God. And that speaks to the talent, the production, the writers, and just the professionalism of all the guys, the men and women that work for WWE.
I was speaking to a couple of employees there, and we were talking about when the overrun went away a while back, and they're like, I don't think people understand the creative freedom that is, that now that extra few minutes, and basically we go off the air when we want after 11, that's gone now too, so that's another hurdle that they have to jump. With Vince
Big
McMahon,
time, man.
With Vince McMahon, there's this perception that he doesn't listen. Oh, sorry about that. There's this perception he doesn't listen to anybody, but when I look at the Asuka, Becky Lynch, Charlotte storyline, I'm like, that's a pretty good indication of him listening to the crowd, listening to what's in tune. And maybe that's frustrating to fans when that doesn't happen more. It seems like they want to go in that direction more. Can you remember a situation where he was like, God damn it, pal, they're behind this person, let's rock with it?
I'm trying to think of something in particular. See, so when you talk about listening to the audience, it's a funny thing, because the audience is not one, like, it's not a monolith. Right. Mm-hmm. Even in the writers' room, even in the room with writers and producers and agents, we can't all agree on who we like and who's good and what we should do. So the idea that all the millions of WWE fans have this singular voice is kind of a fallacy. So then you have to say, okay, how do we measure that voice? Is it just the in-arena reactions? Well, maybe. I mean, that's one indication. However, supporting the WWE at a live event is the most expensive way to do it. So those are perhaps are more diehard fans there. On any given night. So can you say, hey, maybe by the merchandise sales? Yeah, perhaps. By the response on the internet? Yeah, that's an indication too. Is that a vocal minority? I don't know. So you have to there's a lot of sort of like different factors. And there's this other fan, this almost mysterious, mythical, like the casual fan, the lapsed fan, the fan that we're trying to get, that's beyond the barrier of the people that generally watch the show or generally come to the show. So there's this like, hey, what do these people theoretically, conceivably, maybe like? And so you have to sort of take a guess at that. I'll say this, man. You know, when AJ Styles came into WWE, Vince was very skeptical on him for every reason you would think. But it was Vince, so he came in, I think maybe like Royal Rumble, right? Royal Rumble
Yeah.
of I think 16. Got a great reaction in the when he debuted. Vince was still skeptical. He's like, well, that's just one audience. And, you know, AJ, what's his character? And, you know, can he talk? You know, he's got the Southern accent. All the, you know, nobody knows who he is. All the reasons you would think Vince didn't like him. But it was Vince McMahon who had the idea of having him work with Roman Reigns a couple months later after WrestleMania, after Roman won the title. Like, you know, we had pitched, all right, you figure Roman just won the title, you want to give him a strong heel. The strongest heels we probably had at that point were probably Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens. But Vince was the one that was like, we're going with AJ Styles. And so, you know, you have to give the devil his due in those moments.
What are some things that maybe you learned that you didn't quite understand why they happened before you got into the creative aspect? Because obviously you wrestled for a long time for companies like Ring of Honor, who I don't want to call them bare bones, but it's mainly based on the wrestling product and some really great storytelling, and stuff like Wrestling Society X, which was a lot of like really over the top stuff as well. But what, when you got into WWE, did you see and you're like, okay, now I know why they do that?
I mean, I learned a lot working for the WWE. One of the most valuable lessons I learned is that the solution doesn't come. First of all, it's easy to point out the problem. It's so easy. I don't want to call it meaningless, but it's like borderline meaningless. Of course, you have to know what the problem is before you can solve it. But like, everybody knows the problem. Like, don't think that what critics say, like, we didn't know, or they don't know, like, going into it. But you have a finite number of options, you know, really, when you start to put the pieces together. And so the solution, so it's easy to point out problems. It's a whole different thing to come up with the solutions. And the solutions don't come in generalities, and they don't come in vagueness, and they don't come in like, you know, what if it's something like this? I remember one of the things I disliked about WWE going into it was it's like you always know what's going to happen, right? You know, in the last segment of the show, it's going to be like, oh, Seth Rollins is coming out to address the crowd, and oh my God, but Brock Lesnar's still in the building. What's going to happen? It's like, yeah, I know what's going to happen because you just told me what's going to happen now, as opposed to leaving it a surprise that Brock's in the building, right? So I said, hey man, what if we promote a little less and deliver a little more? You know, under promote, over deliver, to create an atmosphere where people like will never know what's going to happen. It's like, okay, first of all, one thing I learned is if people don't know something's coming, they don't tune in for it. I remember we had The Undertaker one time. I want to say like in the Barclays, like show up like out of nowhere, and it was a terribly low rated quarter hour because people didn't know The Undertaker was coming. But when you say The Undertaker's coming, people tune in. So A, there's that, and B, it's like, okay, fine, you want to create an atmosphere where like anything can happen, and it's, you know, there's surprises all the time. What are surprises you can have? Well, okay, let's say, you know, have other stars from the past come and do something. Okay, great. What other stars? Well, you know, you could have like Jake Roberts show up. Okay, fine. Jake Roberts can show up. What's he gonna do? Well, he's gonna show up. Okay, fine. Jake Roberts shows up and does something at some point. Who else does what? Well, okay, we don't have a relationship with Kurt Angle at this point. Okay, Hulk Hogan just, okay, you can't, who else means something, and then you're tasked with like, and then it's like, no, here's a list. They give you a list of like, here's all the ex-WWE guys that we have a relationship with. Who do you want to show up and do what when? Like, all right, so maybe there's not a ton of them, but you know, different surprises, different things happen. Okay, like what? You know, you do a stunt. I don't, you know, it's okay. What sort of stunt? You know, you can have some like Steve Austin used to do with the cars. Okay, and you have Steve Austin come in with a, well, no, not that. And you know, you have to come up with this stuff, and then you think, okay, here's a couple things. How much of this can we do? How long can we do it for? And will that really change anything? And so there's very specific. The answers are specific. They're not general.
Yeah. So on that list of talent that WWE has at their disposal, former talent, who would be the most surprising to most people?
I don't even know at this point. I mean, who do people even care about? I mean, they bring out these people, in various ways in different times. I'll tell you what, man. There was an idea that I had a new appreciation for when I started working there, and that was when they had the special guest GMs every week.
Yeah.
I was like, man, what a good idea. We have the same talent all the time. This adds like one new element, one new dimension every single week. I'm like, that's a good idea. That's an idea of and it was it was executed fairly well, but something that's okay. We know every week something new is going to happen, and that was it. That was a good idea.
Now over on Impact, you all have had a lot of additions to the roster that I think have been really great. I think Jordan Grace was a good one. We've seen Kiera Hogan emerge. Who is somebody that maybe that you push for, or when they got signed, you were like, hell yeah, can't wait to write creative for that person?
I mean, I was really excited. I've been pushing for Tessa Blanchard for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I had sort of I was trying to court her to come to Impact Wrestling, and I was really glad she made that decision. I mean, when we got Penta and Phoenix, that was like a huge coup, I thought, for us. I mean, those are probably the two hottest unsigned, acts on independents that at the time. So yeah, man, we have had some good. Brian Cage is a great addition to the roster, and there's other guys out there. We have our eyes on some other people too. So yeah, it has been a good year as far as I think the quality of talent that's come in.
When you were brought in, I remember you made your debut. You made a surprise appearance at Bound for Glory. Was it always known you were going to do something with Congo Kong, or was that just a case of the opportunity arising?
So when Scott Moore called me after I got fired from WWE, and I'd known Scott since I was probably like 16 years old, and so he texted me. He's like, hey, I don't know if you want to come here, if people want you here, but we should probably have a conversation about it. So he called me up, and I was like, all right, Scott, what do you got for me? He's like, well, first we were thinking we need a manager for Congo Kong. We thought you might be good for that. And I was like, great, done. He's like, oh, okay, well. He's like, well, I was going to manage him actually, but then we thought maybe you'd be better suited on creative. I was like, yeah, I'll do creative too, but like, let me manage Kong. I've actually wanted to manage Kong for a long time. I had talked to him years before that about maybe sending him stuff to WWE with me managing him. I've known Kong longer than I've known anybody else in the wrestling business for over 20 years now. But the day of, I'll say this, the day of was Bound for Glory. They didn't know what I was going to do or how it was going to come out. The TVs, they kind of didn't know exactly. It was like my addition to it was a last minute piece in that week.
It was a nice surprise. You were a name that had been out there and had been highly publicized last year, especially. And I think it's kind of cool that you've landed this creative role with Impact Wrestling. When you look at creative, and you've talked about how you all make your own rules, and you could call the Ali Su Young storyline bizarre as it is, but I had somebody say, well, what's the strangest, most bizarre creative suggestion that's been made during your time backstage at any company? What would you point to? Whether it was yours or somebody else's.
I mean, I still might use the idea. I don't know if I can tell you.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Because I guess yeah. The most bizarre creative suggestion that you make in a pro wrestling company could end up being one of the better ideas in a wrestling company as well. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, right? I mean, whether you like the Ali Sue story, some people loved it. It was a risk. Right. But I do know if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. And we have the opportunity to Impact do new stuff. That's part of the fun part about right now is that we have the opportunity to sort of rebrand ourselves and recreate ourselves. We've done that in this past year. Like, I know not everybody loved that Sue and Ellie thing. I saw something Dave Meltzer wrote about it. Like, yeah, he didn't like it. There, like, online, when I searched that night, I would say about 80% was like, that was awesome. Wow, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And 20% were like, yo, that was embarrassing. What the hell was that? But nothing's ever going to be universally liked. And I never begrudge anybody for trying something new. Never. Because look, with so many people trying the same thing. So trying something new, all the more power to them, even if it falls on their face.
A couple more questions as we wrap up. A reminder, you all can check out Jimmy January 4th, Zelo Pro Wrestling in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee Meltdown. And January 6th, Impact Wrestling has the homecoming pay-per-view. Impact announced that they landed a new TV deal today. What did you know about that leading into it, and do you have any other insight?
I was aware of the TV deal going into it. It's pursuit of a network that is at least partially owned by Anthem Sports Entertainment, so that maybe might give us a little more leeway. And also, the demographic is hopefully a little more in line with our products. Our products, of course, skews more males, and the top demographic skews more females. So hopefully this is a nice fit, and hopefully we can help build their channel while we do our thing.
Jimmy, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I could talk to you about creative and stuff like that all day. Really, thank you. Let the people know where they can follow you on social media. You had, as I mentioned, a great live stream talking about creative writing on your Instagram.
Yeah, man. And Twitter, it's Jimmy Jacobs X. Instagram, it's Jimmy Jacobs X. And yeah, man, check me out January 4th, Milwaukee Meltdown for Zelo Pro. I'm wrestling Austin Aries, which should be interesting. I have not seen or spoken to Austin Aries since Bound for Glory. So that'll be, we haven't wrestled since like 2011. So that'll be interesting. And then Homecoming, I think the card looks really good. I think that I think this is going to be a really good show. So if you haven't watched Impact in a while, like just roll the dice, see what happens. If it sucks, you never have to watch again. But I think it's going to be a pretty damn good show, man. I really do.
It looks like a good show. You got Eddie Edwards and Moose, Falls Count Anywhere, Abyss, and Eli Drake. Eli Drake, just one of the most naturally charismatic talents in the world. Tessa Blanchard and Taya have such a special chemistry to them that it works every time they get in the ring. Johnny Impact versus Brian Cage. You have an Ultimate X match. You have LAX and the Lucha Brothers. It's a really good looking card.
Man. Yeah, LAX Lucha Brothers, I think is gonna probably steal the show. And you got Gail Kim repping the match between Taya and Tessa. So that's interesting. You got Gail sort of coming out from behind the curtain one last time here.
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time. Hope to talk to you again soon.